Well, the man at the centre of one of Australia's most infamous outback murder cases has died. Bradley John Murdoch, the man convicted of killing British backpacker Peter Falconio, passed away in a palliative care unit in Alice Springs at the age of 67. Murdoch was serving a life sentence for the 2001 murder of Falconio and the attempted abduction of Falconio's girlfriend, Joanne Lees. But even in death, he kept a dark secret. He never revealed where Falconio's body was buried. In a statement, Murdoch's family said, "To many, Bradley Murdoch is known only for the events that led to his conviction in 2005 for the murder of British backpacker Peter Falconio, a crime for which he has always denied responsibility from his arrest until his death. But to those who truly knew him, he was much more than the headlines. When given the opportunity, Brad was a devoted father, father-in-law, and proud poppy who never missed a chance to brag about his grandchildren. He was a beloved brother, uncle, and friend." Police have doubled the reward to $500,000 for information that could lead to finding Falconio's remains. Despite being convicted, Murdoch maintained his innocence until the very end. And my next guest, criminal behavioural expert, true crime author, and my podcast partner, Amanda Howard, believes the wrong man may have been jailed. Amanda, that's a very big call. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you believe Bradley Murdoch killed Peter Falconio?
I just think that there's so much that is left open in this case. I mean, we can even start with that we haven't found Peter Falconio's body, which can actually mean that you can't prove that he's dead, which means he can't have been killed. So
but people have been convicted even without a body many times.
But there's often a lot of evidence to go with that. So, we have things like Lee's described the truck and said that it had a trailer and Murdoch's truck didn't have a trailer. There was talk about the shoes he was wearing, and they can't prove either way if they were the correct shoes. They could link the footprints at the site to shoes worn by the guy in the CCTV camera, but they can never prove that Bradley Murdoch had those shoes.
Are you telling me Murdoch has never actually been identified as being part of the scene? The testimony and conviction was all based on Joanne Lees's testimony?
Of an article that she saw on a BBC website many years later. And so then when she was asked to identify him, she goes, "Oh, yeah, it's that guy who I saw was arrested for raping two women in Adelaide." And so she sort of saw him as a criminal and said, "Yep, that's him," even though he looked nothing like the identified photo that she had actually provided to police in the Northern Territory at the time.
You're very offhanded when you're saying, yeah, that's him. It sounds like you're suggesting she was just looking for someone to blame, or do you think she was somehow involved?
Well, I mean, when she talks about the truck, for an example, she was put into the front seat with the dog, and then somehow she ended up in the back of the truck. She doesn't know how that happened, and there was no through way to do that. And then she slipped out the back easily and ran off into the bush. However, there was no way, if the tarpaulin was on the truck, that she could have been able to do that. So there's gaps in her story that doesn't match what she claimed to have happened.
Okay. A lot of people would take issue with you pouring doubt on Bradley Murdoch's guilty verdict here. Just today, the Herald Sun in Melbourne posted this story taking issue with his claim of innocence, saying his insistence defied the facts, such as his DNA on the T-shirt of Falconio's partner, Joanne Lees, and his keeping of Lees's hair tie, which he threaded around a shoulder holster like a trophy. Okay, there's some facts presented by this journalist. Your reaction?
Well, where is the gun that he used? Where is the shell casings that come from it? Where is the blood that links him to it? There's all of these bits and pieces.
Okay, but what about this claim of the DNA evidence on the T-shirt?
This is the same DNA that they couldn't identify the first 3 times that they tried.
Okay, and what about the keeping?
We've seen in other cases where they've decided 20 years later that yes, that those hair samples did match a case after they had said no, it hadn't matched for 20 years. It's convenient to then sort of make A equals C when it doesn't.
Look, I trust what you say. As you know, you were convinced Kathleen Folbig was innocent. It took her 20 years, and that was proven right. You're on, how shall we say, this guy doesn't seem like he deserves a lot of sympathy, Bradley Murdoch. So you are going against the grain. But tell me, the other line in here is that he was keeping Lee's hair tie, which he threaded around a shoulder holster like a trophy.
And where is that? And how have they proved that? How would a hair still be found? Like, they didn't arrest this guy for many years. And the only reason that they looked at him is because she saw something on a BBC website that had actually come from a guy in WA saying, yeah, I think I know that guy because I ran drugs with him from here to here, which if they were doing that to get where Falconio was 300 kilometres out of his drug run that he was apparently on. You know,
but are you saying there was no hair tie?
I would strangely suggest that if he had a hair tie of hers for several years later until they found it, how would that hair still be on it? It makes no sense.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Do killers often do deathbed confessions, or do they like taking their secrets to the grave?
No, deathbed confessions are what we hear in TV and films. It's this drama that this person's about to die and they're going to their hand's going to drop off the side of the bed after they've said, yes, I killed him. It doesn't happen, and the times that it actually has happened, sometimes those people have lived. So you don't do.
But I guess the idea is that let's assume he was guilty for the moment. I know that you're pouring cold water on that, but let's assume it. What is the psychology of killers and serial killers? Do they want people to know? Is there power in them taking that secret to the grave and stopping families from having closure? Because the family just want the body to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that, it would be great to think that Peter Falconio is alive somewhere and that he actually comes back. But
very doubtful.
Everything does suggest that he's not dead. What I'm suggesting is maybe the wrong person went to jail. But I think they people who kill and don't reveal those secrets often will never. So it's not a power thing. It's just that they are done. And it is a bargaining chip that they don't want to play with. There are some, Ted Bundy was going to tell them about an extra 50 victims at one point, and that was a stalling tactic. But most of them, if they're not going to tell, they're not going to tell. But then we see people like BTK. He didn't tell anyone until they said, look, the case is cold, we're going to close it. And that's when he decided that he had to talk. And then when he got caught, he talked, as we know on our podcast. We did a whole series on his confession. So some of them, once they start talking, it does start to pour out. But holding evidence like this, I think it's more to do with that they don't have the answers. So but we don't know. Someone may in 20 years' time have a deathbed confession, say that they were the actual killer of Peter Falconio.
Well, it's fascinating and it's interesting you're going against the grain. Amanda Howard is my podcast partner on the Monsters Who Murder with the Serial Killer podcast. Amanda, thank you for joining us. You end up joining us a lot because there's a lot of true crime going on. So thank you for taking the time.
I'm always happy to jump on, Robert, and have a chat about crime.
Good on you. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.
See ya.
Fun, insightful interviews from a washed-up producer with nothing to lose. Night to night, but night to night, but night to night. It's good.